Hey everyone, welcome to the deep dive where we take a look at those really long sources you've been meaning to get to and kind of boil them down to their most interesting parts.
I like that.
Yeah, like a super strong shot of espresso,
Hmm.
from a whole pot of coffee,
Yeah.
but with knowledge instead of caffeine.
Oh, I like that.
I'm Hari.
And I'm Kimi, and I'm here to help you navigate today's topic.
Okay, Kimi. So are you ready to dive into some ancient Greek poetry
I am.
and uncover a story more exciting than a chariot race through the Athenian agora?
I am indeed. I love a good mystery.
Yeah.
And the story of Anactoria, a figure who appears in the poetry of Sappho, is full of them. And we have excerpts from her Wikipedia page.
Okay.
And it's amazing how much intrigue can be packed into just a few paragraphs.
Yeah, and speaking of Sappho, for those who might not be familiar with her, she was kind of like the Beyoncé of ancient Greece, a rock star poet,
Right.
known for her incredible lyrical skill and her passionate verses, especially when it came to expressing love and desire.
A very apt comparison, and those themes of love and desire are central to the poems Sappho wrote about Anactoria. We're talking about two fragments specifically known as Fragment 16 and Fragment 31.
Okay.
The latter often referred to as Ode to Anactoria. Now, here's where things get really interesting. Fragment 31 doesn't actually name Anactoria directly,
Oh?
but scholars are pretty convinced it's about her based on the shared intensity of emotion with Fragment 16, where Sappho explicitly mentions Anactoria's name.
So we're already dealing with fragments of poetry.
Right.
And on top of that, we have this mystery of a missing name. It's like trying to solve a riddle written on a crumbling scroll.
Mm-hmm.
But Sappho doesn't hold back in Fragment 16. She compares her longing for Anactoria to Helen of Troy's desire for Paris, the whole Trojan War sparking kind of desire.
It's a really powerful comparison because Sappho is essentially saying that her feelings for Anactoria are as epic and earth-shattering as a conflict that reshaped the ancient world. This brings us to the first big question surrounding Anactoria. Was she a real person who inspired these intense emotions, or was she a product of Sappho's poetic imagination? Maybe even a pseudonym used to protect the identity of her true beloved. After all, Sappho lived in a time and place where expressing same-sex desire could be risky.
It makes you wonder if Sappho was deliberately weaving a veil of mystery around her muse, maybe as a way to preserve the relationship from prying eyes or societal judgment.
Right.
And speaking of mystery, the question of Anactoria's true identity gets even more intriguing when you consider a theory about her origins.
Okay.
Some scholars believe she may have been from the city of Miletus based on a reference to Anagora in the Suda, a 10th century Byzantine encyclopedia.
That's right, and what makes this theory so tantalizing is that Miletus itself was sometimes referred to as Anactoria.
Oh, wow.
Imagine that being from a city that shares your name. It almost feels like something out of a myth or a legend.
It's like those layers of meaning you find in poetry where a single word can hold multiple interpretations and allusions.
Speaking of poetic layers, let's talk about how Sappho actually describes Anactoria in Fragment 16. She uses incredibly vivid imagery, stating that she would rather see her lovely step and the radiant sparkle of her face than all the war chariots in Lydia and soldiers battling in arms.
Wow.
It's almost like she's saying Anactoria's beauty outshines the spectacle of war itself.
It's such a powerful image, and it makes you realize that for Sappho, love and beauty were forces more potent than any army. I'm especially intrigued by that phrase, radiant sparkle, particularly the word amarygma, which Sappho uses in the original Greek.
Amarygma is fascinating because it's not just about visual sparkle.
Yeah.
Scholars believe it also suggests a kind of captivating beauty and movement, like the way light dances on water or the flutter of a bird's wing.
Okay.
Sappho was trying to capture not just Anactoria's physical appearance, but the very essence of her being, the way she moves through the world with grace and radiance.
You can almost picture Anactoria walking into a room and captivating everyone with her presence, can't you?
Absolutely, and this leads us to a question that has sparked endless debate among scholars. Is Sappho's poetry autobiographical, a direct expression of her own personal experiences? Or is she crafting a persona, an archetype of love and longing that speaks to universal human emotions? Is this Sappho's story, or is it a story she's telling?
I think that's part of what makes these poems so captivating.
Right.
They invite us to explore those questions of identity, desire, and artistic expression without offering easy answers.
Yeah.
And those questions have resonated through the centuries, inspiring countless artists and writers to offer their own interpretations of Sappho and Anactoria's story.
And those interpretations, as you'll see, are just as fascinating as the original fragments themselves.
Okay, so it sounds like we've got a lot more ground to cover. So let's take a quick breather, and we'll be right back to dive deeper into this captivating tale. Welcome back. We're picking up our exploration of Anactoria, and I'm excited to see where this deep dive takes us next.
Well, prepare to be transported to 19th century England, where we meet Algernon Charles Swinburne, the poet who was so enthralled by Sappho that he wrote an entire poem titled Anactoria, published in 1866, directly inspired by those tantalizing fragments we were just discussing.
So Swinburne basically took Sappho's story and gave it his own spin. I'm curious to know how he approached such a complex and, let's be honest, potentially controversial topic, especially for Victorian England.
Swinburne wasn't one to shy away from controversy, and his Anactoria definitely pushed boundaries. Imagine the scene, a stuffy Victorian drawing room polite conversation about the weather, and then someone starts reciting this passionate, dramatic monologue.
Right.
Written from Sappho's perspective, directly addressing Anactoria.
Oh, wow.
It must have caused quite a stir.
I can only imagine the gasps and side-eye glances, but beyond the initial shock value, what was Swinburne trying to achieve with this reimagining of Sappho's story?
I think he was drawn to the power and intensity of Sappho's emotions. And he saw in her a kindred spirit, someone who dared to defy societal norms and embrace passion on her own terms. Remember, this was a time when women's voices, especially when it came to expressing desire, were often silenced or dismissed. By giving Sappho a voice, a platform to speak her truth. Swinburne was challenging those very norms and pushing the boundaries of what was considered acceptable in art and literature.
It's almost as if he was using Sappho and Anactoria as a lens to examine the constraints placed on women in his own time, using those ancient fragments to spark a conversation about freedom of expression and the right to love whomever you choose.
Exactly. And remember that Swinburne wasn't just retelling Sappho's story, he was reinterpreting it through his own lens, adding layers of meaning and complexity. He was known for his beautifully crafted rhyming couplets, which created a very different effect from the fragmented style of Sappho's original Greek.
It makes you wonder how Sappho herself would have reacted to Swinburne's interpretation. Would she have been flattered, horrified, or maybe even amused by the audacity of it all? But Swinburne wasn't the only one drawn to the enigma of Anactoria, was he?
Oh, definitely not. The allure of Sappho and Anactoria seems to have transcended time and cultures, inspiring artists and writers across generations. You have H.V. Sutherland, for instance, who wrote a verse drama titled Sappho in 1896, where Anactoria plays a significant role. And then fast forward to 1961, we have the American poet Robert Lowell, who penned a series of poems called Three Letters to Anactoria, offering a unique perspective on their relationship.
It's remarkable to see how Anactoria, a figure shrouded in mystery and known primarily through Sappho's words, managed to capture the imaginations of artists centuries later, almost as if she stepped out of the shadows of history to become a muse in her own right.
And sometimes the most intriguing figures are the ones we never fully get to know, the ones who leave behind just enough traces to spark our curiosity and send us on these fascinating quests for understanding, speaking of traces. There's one final piece of this puzzle I want to share with you, a visual echo of Anactoria that's hidden in plain sight within a painting from 1881.
Hidden in a painting. Tell me more. This sounds intriguing. A hidden clue in a painting. It sounds like we're about to step into a real-life art history mystery.
Well, maybe not quite a mystery novel, but definitely a fascinating detail that speaks volumes about Anactoria's enduring presence in the world of art and literature. We're talking about a painting called Sappho and Alcaeus by Lawrence Alma-Tadema, a 19th century artist known for his meticulously detailed scenes of ancient life.
Okay, so we have this painting depicting Sappho and Alcaeus, another famous lyric poet from ancient Greece. But where does Anactoria fit into all of this?
That's the clever part. Alma-Tadema doesn't actually paint Anactoria herself. But if you look closely at the scene, which is set in a beautiful open-air theater, you'll find her name inscribed on one of the seats. It's almost as if Alma-Tadema is subtly acknowledging her presence, her connection to this world of poetry and creativity, even though she remains unseen, just like in those fragments of Sappho's work.
It's like she's a silent observer watching over this gathering of artists and poets from across the ages, a reminder that even those who are not physically present can still exert a powerful influence on our creative endeavors. It makes you wonder what Anactoria would have thought of all this attention, all these interpretations of her story swirling around centuries after she lived.
I think that's part of what makes exploring history and literature so captivating. We're constantly encountering these gaps, these missing pieces, these figures who emerge from the shadows only to disappear again, leaving behind a trail of questions and interpretations. It's like trying to piece together a mosaic where some of the tiles have been lost to time, and we have to use our imagination and intuition to fill in the gaps.
And just like a mosaic, even with those missing pieces, the overall image can still be stunningly beautiful and thought-provoking.
Exactly. And speaking of thought-provoking, as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Anactoria, I'm left with this lingering question. What does her story, a story told in fragments and whispers across centuries, tell us about the enduring power of love, beauty, and the human desire for connection?
It's a question that resonates with me as well. Here we are thousands of years after Sappho first penned those verses about Anactoria, and we're still captivated by their story, their emotions, their struggles. I think it speaks to the universality of those human experiences, the longing for love, the search for beauty, the desire to leave our mark on the world, even if it's just a name inscribed on a theater seat in a painting.
And perhaps it also reminds us that even the seemingly smallest voices, those whispered from the distant past, can have a ripple effect across times, inspiring generations of artists, writers, and dreamers to explore those same themes of love loss and the search for meaning in a world that's constantly changing. It's a reminder that our stories, no matter how small or fragmented, have the potential to connect us across time and space in ways we may never fully comprehend.
It's been an incredible journey, and I hope our listeners have enjoyed diving into the fascinating world of Sappho and Anactoria with us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking out those radiant sparkles of beauty and inspiration wherever you may find them. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.